Hello, everyone. We wanted to take a quick moment to thank you all for joining us today. This podcast was recorded and is made available to you by Whitley Penn LLP and WP Wealth LLP solely for informational purposes. The information, views, and opinions expressed in this podcast are general in nature and are not intended to be construed as the provision of financial or investment advice by Whitley Penn or WP Wealth. The information discussed in this podcast is accurate as of the day it was recorded, but may then become outdated over time. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions, comments, or concerns in regard to the content presented. Thank you again for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Hey everybody, welcome back to our next edition of WP Talks. I'm Tom Ryan. I'm the Director of Wealth Management through Whitley Penn, through our group WP Wealth. And today I'm excited to have Mark Topel join us. Mark is one of the original founders of Whitley Penn and is a tax partner with the firm. And before we get started, Mark, I have to say congratulations that during the shelter in place, you celebrated your 37th year anniversary of the founding of Whitley Penn, and so that's awesome. The firm is, as most people know, is a tremendous Texas-based firm and well respected. So again, congratulations to you and for the success you've had over the last 37 years.
Well, thank you, Tom. And Tom, it's good to be here with you today, and also, for many of those years, most of those years, it's been good to have you along with us in the firm.
Thank you. Well, we're excited about the topic today. You know, the last several podcasts that we did through WP Wealth really focused on the theme of navigating through the financial markets, given everything that we've been through. And we thought it would be interesting to get a different perspective from Mark, who, again, is one of the tax partners here at Whitley Penn. Obviously, we know the turbulence and the volatility that's affected capital markets, but for other professionals, especially professionals in the firm, they've dealt with their own challenges, different than what we've dealt with, but significant nonetheless. And so, if you don't mind, let's just jump right in. I'd love to get your thoughts on some of this. So, Mark, you've been practicing tax for over 40 years now, and this has got to be the most interesting of those 40 plus years. If you would, talk a little bit about some of the challenges you faced this year amid the COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've actually been practicing now for 42 years, and by far and away, this is the most interesting, unprecedented year on record that certainly I can remember, and that's probably taken place for a long, long time. There have been many challenges that have taken place internally with our staff, from partners all the way through to our staff and administrative folks. Probably the number one challenge has been just that a good portion of the folks have been working away from the office at home, and another smaller portion has been here in the office. So during tax season, there's a lot of back and forth, asking questions, coming up with strategies, what's the best thing to do for the client. But that was more challenging to do that when you're actually in two separate physically located areas. Working with the clients has been somewhat of a challenge too, because we see so many of our clients during the springtime in March and April, whether it's to go through their individual information or their business information to kind of recap the previous year being 2019 or to get ready for 2020. And a lot of those meetings have been curtailed or deferred until after this virus kind of takes a back seat and we get kind of back to normal. So it has been very challenging of a year for sure.
Yeah. You brought up the point about the staff and the people, and it's interesting. The business model is such that a lot of the heavy lifting is done by younger professionals through the guidance and mentorship of more senior people. And it had to be challenging both from a business standpoint, but also just from a learning standpoint. Maybe if you would talk a little bit about kind of that learning curve or that growth, the professional development and growth of the younger people. Do you feel like this unique environment has stifled that? And if so, how do you overcome that to make sure that they're on their professional development path and that they're not handicapped in any way by that?
Yeah, as we talked about earlier, the challenge has been not being together, that you can't see each other face to face and work together. Accountants seem to learn better visually as opposed to listening to something. So you can't get together and drop and explain things as easily as if you were in the same location. Going back 42 years ago, not only was that a time before smartphones, it was a time before computers. So we didn't have the luxury of the various things that we have today, such as Zoom or Skype or instant messaging or even email capability. In fact, we didn't even have the capability to do faxes 42 years ago. So we're in a different position, a very much better position today than we were back in the day. So there are ways to still work with the staff, train them, and we all became much more proficient in Skype calls or Zoom calls, even instant messaging and emails back and forth. If questions would come up or issues would come up, we could still strategize. And I would say we're much better using those tools today than we were a few months ago because we had to.
Right. We've been back. Whitley Penn's been back in the office on a full-time basis since the beginning of the month, and we're not quite at 100%. I'm just curious, within your group, have most folks come back, and are you sensing that some of the professionals really enjoyed working at the kitchen table, and it's going to be a struggle getting them back into the routines of being in the office on a full-time basis and re-engaging?
Yeah, in walking around the office, I would say we're back up now to 75 to 80%, probably. In accounting, in fact, business, generally speaking, the bottom line is efficiencies. We all want to improve our efficiencies. So working from home definitely provided some efficiencies in that you didn't have to spend maybe 30 minutes to an hour getting ready to go to work. You didn't have to drive 30 minutes to an hour to get to work. You didn't have to drive 30 minutes to an hour to get back home from work. So it did provide efficiencies that way. And hopefully everybody used that time to get more efficient at whatever tasks they were doing in front of them that day.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I personally enjoyed a lot of that time as well. It made life a lot more convenient. But I think you and I, we kind of thrive on the energy with people around us. So it was also good to get back. But it'll be interesting as we move more towards 100% and see where everybody is here in the next several weeks to months as we go forward. But
yeah, and I agree with you, Tom. I mean, I think the longer you're in this profession, I think the more you enjoy being around folks, both internally and externally. So, I really miss that, spending time with one another. It's good to have that back, and we'll see where we go from here.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe moving on to another topic. There seemed to be a dual focus during tax season. One was the traditional work associated with assisting clients in complying with their tax filing requirements. Yet at the same time, your group had to absorb, major tax law changes that came about from the government as part of the COVID crisis, and really shift to begin assisting the clients to navigate through the different application processes and filings for the various relief packages that were being offered. Can you talk about that a little bit? Maybe some of the challenges or how that was disruptive and where it left you in the normal season of compliance and tax filings?
Yeah, that truly is what made this year so interesting so far, so unprecedented. And here we are in mid-June. So we can hardly wait for the next 6 months to see what plays out. Everything was pretty normal in the accounting world through March 15th. March 15th due date came and went, and we were getting ready for April 15th. And about a couple weeks later, April 15th got extended until July 15th. So gave everybody time to kind of defer the due date on so many projects for another 90 days. But at the end of March came the first of three, as you mentioned, major laws that took place that affected businesses, affected accountants, bankers, attorneys, advisors to businesses. It was the first of three. The third was passed by the president probably about 2 weeks ago. We are still getting guidance and direction on all three of those laws. So trying to keep up with those. At the same time, now we're gearing up for the July 15th due date. Right now it feels a whole lot like today is late March, early April. It's been an interesting time for sure.
Yeah. I know the complexity of a lot of the law changes, within our wealth management group. We obviously stay on top of that as well, because so much of what we do is coordinated with the tax folks of the firm and in offering planning and advice. And I'm just curious for the average small business owner, this seemed like pretty complicated stuff, and it all came down at a pretty crisis point where everybody was, fearful and unsure and just had more questions than not. Was this something that business owners could navigate themselves, or would it require generally the assistance of a professional such as yourself and Whitley Penn? And maybe just your thoughts on that broadly with what the government did, and was it practical that it was usable by most small businesses?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the intent of Congress was to make all of this legislation very easy, transparent, easy to get through. And now, like we said, there's three major laws that have been passed. We're still getting guidance and direction. The intent seems to have changed midstream from Congress, or at least the Treasury, as we go through this. So depending on the client, I think clients generally began the process on their own and took it as far as they could. But I think most every client looked for further advice from somebody, whether it was us at Whitley Penn, their banker, their attorney, somebody to kind of take their hand and get them through the intricacies of the PPP loan program, or how to manage their retirement plan distributions, deferrals of Social Security. I mean, there's an awful lot in all of those bills, and it usually would take the help of somebody else to get them through it.
Yeah, that was my takeaway. It seemed awfully complex, and the ball kept moving down the field, and the rules were changing along the way. And so it would be very difficult for somebody who was just trying to run their business through all this to also be able to commit the energies and resources to stay up and really take advantage of that. I guess maybe from a professional opinions perspective, you work with a lot of small businesses, you work with a lot of high net wealth individuals, and so all these programs affected different segments of the economy, be it stimulus or PPP or lending facilities. In your opinion, did they largely hit the mark? Did they accomplish? We're talking about trillions of dollars. Did they hit the mark? Did they do what they were intended to do largely, or maybe not so much?
Yeah, I think the answer to that question lies in the future, like so many questions do. So certain businesses benefited a great deal from that. And in those situations, those businesses, those individuals, it did hit the mark. But other situations, it might have been too much at the wrong time. Other businesses, it might not have been nearly enough at the wrong time. So when Congress basically got together to pass this legislation, really in what probably took them a week or less, I really believe they did their very best to do the right thing for everybody. And I think they really tried hard and were somewhat successful based on how quickly they put that legislation together. But now that we're basically coming up on 75 days past that period of time, there are a lot of issues out there with businesses that are still not only struggling today, but will be struggling a great deal in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Given the magnitude of the spend from the Treasury, you and I were talking earlier about how in the past politicians and the parties would shut down government for a vote to increase the spending limit by 250 billion. They've spent trillions and talking about trillions more. What do you see tax policy looking like, and when? And does it matter what party is in office for the next cycle? Would Republicans raise taxes? Do they have to? What's it going to do to what they've tried to use to stimulate the economy? I'd love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Tom, I'm happy to report to you that these are the good old days. As bad as certain things have been over the last few months and unpredictable as the future is going to be, I really believe from a tax point of view that these are the good old days. I don't think there's much doubt that taxes are going to go up, and that the taxes that we're currently paying at this time are probably the lowest that we'll see for the rest of our lifetime. And you asked the question of when is this going to happen, and I think the answer to that is it depends. I think it depends a lot on this election in November. It depends who the president's going to be and what's going to happen to the House and Senate. But I think it's really just a matter of time that taxes will go up. And I think everybody in Washington, D.C. understands that. And it's just a question of how much and how soon.
Yeah, the times they're interesting, to say the least. I want to shift gears a bit. I think this would be really interesting. You work with a lot of small business owners. I'd love to know what conversations you're having with business owners, about the effects to their business of the coronavirus. I know, in normal times you talk with business owners about specifics in their business. I'd love to know how those conversations are changing now, if they are, and what's on the heart and minds of small business owners right now.
Yeah, in a way, what we do is very similar now as what we've always done. We do our best to provide value for our clients. And what does that mean? Basically, that means increasing and protecting assets, reducing, maybe eliminating known and unknown liabilities, increasing revenue, and reducing expenses. So during this time, the conversation has to do with what can we do to increase our revenues from the government? What kind of programs are the government allowing us to take advantage of? Whether it's a PPP loan where we may not have to pay that loan back, or whether it's an SBA loan that we can pay back over 30 years, or a deferral of Social Security tax that we don't have to pay back for another year or two that's interest-free. And then let's have a discussion too about your expenses. What expenses does it make sense to cut back at this time? And then let's always look at the balance sheet. What assets can we maybe employ to do a better job for the company or for the individual themselves? So basically, the foundation of what we're doing is staying the same, but we have much more to talk about these days than we've had in the past.
Mm-hmm. And when do you think that conversation starts shifting back to kind of bread and butter? And I guess what's your sense for the clients you deal with? Is it varied, or do you have clients that may not survive this economic downturn? Do you have clients that are thriving through it? Maybe a sense for just business in Tarrant County in general, which is primarily the marketplace that you interact with?
Right. That's a good question. And businesses are so varied. I mean, businesses are really what makes the country, the county, function and go forward. And so I think each of us within the firm have clients that are actually doing better now than what they did a few months ago, depending on the business, the type of business, what product they're producing, or what service they're providing for their customers or clients. On the other hand, we have businesses that were ordered by the government to be shut down, and they still have not reopened. So I think it truly is all over the spectrum as to what's taking place. And when do things look like they will get back to normal? Well, I think that's maybe more of a medical question. I think it's when are people going to really feel comfortable getting out and doing things like they used to do? So in other words, when is there going to be a cure or a vaccine for this virus? And I've heard anything from later this year to maybe never ever. And so are we now moving into the new normal? Do we do more socially distancing? Are we more aware of washing our hands and staying sanitized on a regular basis? If so, maybe we never cure the virus, but maybe we reduce other illnesses that have plagued us in so many generations before us. So I think the biggest question that I have as a tax accountant, and probably that you have in your line, is what is the future? And the future is still to be laid out, I believe, at this time.
Yeah. Maybe a final thought, because I know PPP was such a big part of what our folks were working on, and we did several webinars and information distribution to the marketplace, and it was so vital to a lot of our small businesses. Where are we at right now with a lot of, they've extended the measurement period, and I know that made an impact for a lot of businesses, but ultimately there needs to be a resubmission of the kind of facts and circumstances to justify. And I know the government's going to audit loans above certain thresholds. Kind of give us a state of where we are on that, and what are you guys doing in the tax group to help support that right now?
Yeah, good question. So in working with clients, I've always cautioned them, if at all possible, do not make a decision before you have to make a decision. So when it comes to the submission of paperwork for the forgiveness of the PPP loan program, I read some guidance on this that was released last Thursday that indicates that you really have 24 weeks from the time that you receive the funds to make a decision on which way to submit. And then I believe everybody has, I think from that point, I think you actually have another 10 months before you have to submit. So we may be looking at the middle of next year before it's necessary to submit the paperwork for the forgiveness. So as many things have changed over the last 75 days, if the deadline isn't really for another a year from now before we have to submit, I would advise not submitting until the very end. But that doesn't mean to put it off. We could still work on the paperwork that we believe is going to put us in the best position and wait that long to see if we get any more guidance on it. So I know everybody's been kind of panicked, like it's been 8 weeks since I received the funds. What do I need to do? Let's hurry and get it done. What I've read recently indicates that is not necessary for undoubtedly another year from now.
Right. Well, a common theme through most of what you've talked about is just the future and the uncertainty and the unknown. So we'll be really interested to continue to check back on all of this and other issues that we've talked about through our previous podcast. But Mark, I want to thank you again for joining us on WP Talks. It was great talking with you again. Congratulations on the anniversary of Whitley Penn 37 years ago. And I'd encourage everybody to stay tuned and look for future podcasts where you'll we'll interact with other professionals in different disciplines within the firm to kind of get their take on what it was like interacting with clients and other professionals during this COVID crisis. So again, thanks for joining us, and stay tuned and look for future episodes on WP Talks.